Hi everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. I'll wait a couple seconds just to give people a chance to join, but welcome to Asian Women in Leadership. Just to let you know, the session will be recorded, just so you're aware, but no one's cameras will be on apart from the panelists. And if you have questions for the Q&A, we'll read them out. So just so you're aware, it will be recorded. Yeah, I know we've started a little bit late, so I guess I will just introduce it and go now. So yes, as I said, welcome to Asian Women in Leadership. This event is part of our campaign for Asian Heritage Month, which we run annually at the Students' Union. So Asian Heritage Month is one of our 5 liberation campaigns, and this month we've decided to focus on a few themes, such as celebrating the diversity of the Asian diaspora, looking at Asian identity and Asian British identity, and also exploring different issues that are experienced by Asian people in the UK and throughout the world. So we're really grateful to have this panel today where we're going to explore the theme of women in leadership, and I'm going to pass over to Shamima, who is my co-host this evening.
Thank you. Hello everyone. I'm assuming most of you know me, you should know me. I'm Shamima Akhtar, your Students' Union President, and I'm here co-hosting this panel with Tiana. So I was Vice President Welfare last year and was in charge of doing Asian Heritage Month and all the Liberation Months. And this event is something I've been wanting to do since last year, but we haven't been able to because of coronavirus. So this is a way of me redeeming myself as EP Welfare. So I really hope we get the most out of this and really understand the experiences of what it's like to be leaders in different sectors and the experiences that everyone has gone through. I really hope it's a good conversation and something we can all be inspired from. So I'm going to give the panelists a chance to introduce themselves. Shall we start off with Sheila?
Thank you very much indeed, Shamima. So my name is Sheila Gupta. I am the Vice Principal for People, Culture and Inclusion, and I joined Queen Mary in January 2020, so 2 months before lockdown. I am a member of the senior executive team, and in my role as Vice Principal for People, Culture and Inclusion, I have responsibility for staff, for students and for alumni. And in that respect, it's quite an unusual role because most of the roles in the sector either cover staff and all students, but it's quite interesting that mine spans all people who are at the university. And I think that that's really important for me. So I work in very close collaboration with the Student Union and with colleagues across the university in working towards realising our vision at Queen Mary, which is to open the doors of opportunity. And I think that touches very much on the theme for this evening's discussion. So hopefully it'll resonate very much with the audience. What I would like to say is that I've worked at a number of universities, and I think why Queen Mary is so special to me is because it has a wonderfully diverse community of staff and students, far more than any other university I've been in. And that has really enriched the dynamic academic environment that we all, I think, thrive in and flourish in and contribute to. And in making a decision to come to Queen Mary, that really is what inspired me to join. So thank you very much. And I look forward to a really exciting and interesting evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. I remember being in the recruitment panel for Sheila, and I've been in awe ever since. So thank you for your introduction.
Oh, God, thank you.
Will we move on to Bushra?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Lovely to be here. Thank you for the invitation to take part in this evening. I'm one of the council members of Queen Mary, so that it's like a governor, really, and I've coming actually towards the end of my 2 terms of office. I finished actually this year, so I have been involved in over 7.5 years in Queen Mary as a governor, council member. I also was a student at Queen Mary and an alumni, so I've got very, very close affiliations with the university. And I was for 20 years as a head teacher in Plashet School in Newham, and a number of my students at Queen Mary would be their first choice university and so on. So, you know, loads of links with the university, and I'm really privileged to be here tonight. Currently, as I mentioned, I was a head teacher. I had retired from my headship, thought I was going to put my feet up and do lots of traveling and so on, which I did do. I did do a lot of traveling initially, but now I'm part-time CEO of 4 schools in Havering. Queen Mary is one of the sponsors of the Drapers schools. And I do quite a lot of charity work as well. I'm a trustee of an educational charity. I'm also on the Education Advisory Board of Mosaic, which is one of the Prince's Trust charities. And there is a museum being set up in London called the Migration Museum, and I'm on their Education Advisory Board. And, you know, it's really great that I was recognised for some of the work that I've done in education. I was awarded Head Teacher of the Year award in 2012. And I'm also what's called a Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Greater London. And it's an honorary role, but you're trying to work across London to bring different communities together. So wonderful to be here, and really looking forward to learning from the other panelists and sharing some of our, you know, obstacles and some of the rewards we've had in our journeys with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bushra. We really, really look forward to hearing more. Sarah, next.
Thank you, Shamima, and thank you so much for inviting me. I feel a little bit like a usurper because I did not go to Queen Mary. I don't currently have any links or relationships. So this is my first introduction, and it's a fantastic one so far. So thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the other panelists, but also from questions as well. My name's Sarah Owen. I'm the MP for Luton North. I was elected in 2019. We had a December election, which is always a cracking time to have an election. I was about 6 or 7 months pregnant at the time as well. And it was, you know, not the election result that we would have wanted nationally, personally for myself, for the party, but we had a record number of diverse candidates winning in our intake, and we are predominantly women as well out of our 26 of us. So it was a nice intake to come into for sure. And I am often kind of labelled or introduced as the first woman MP of British Chinese descent, and that's kind of true, but actually I think it's much more accurate to say that I am the first Southeast Asian MP of descent, because my mum's from Malaysia. My grandma's Nonya, my granddad was Singaporean, but my great-grandparents are from China on my mum's side, and my dad's family are all English. And I think that we don't talk enough about the diversity, particularly with an Asian culture. It's like you see the census or you see the equalities monitoring form and it says Asian, mixed, other. I'm like, whoa, 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 Asian's massive. Let's talk about how wonderfully diverse it is. So that's part of my job. But I think my big focus, particularly for last year, has always been on jobs, health and inequality. That's the reason why I was involved in politics in the first place. But particularly this last year, it's been so important, those 3 issues, and it's going to be particularly for the recovery coming out of the pandemic. So I really look forward to the rest of the session.
Thank you so much. And lastly, but not least, Afsana.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Very good to be here. Already very excited to be able to share the same platform as some people like Bushra Nasir, who inspire me so much. So I'm so excited to be here. My name is Afsana Salek, and I'm very proud alumni of Queen Mary, University of London. I graduated from Queen Mary in 2017, and I have not left Queen Mary because I'm a community organizer for Citizens UK, and Queen Mary is one of our member organizations, so I am very lucky to get to still work with my university, and most of my work is happening with School of Politics in IIA and Center for Public Engagement. So I organize in Tower Hamlet Citizen, and Tower Hamlet is one of the most diverse borough in the country, and I feel very connected when I'm in Tower Hamlets. I live in Kent, which is not probably as diverse as Tower Hamlet. So I remember like when I was born in Bangladesh and I came to this country, and we came to Kent, and I was just like, wow. I don't know where I was, and so many of my friends in school, they used to see me as like, they've never seen women like me, because my school was not diverse at all. And I still remember people asking me, what do you wear? What do you have in your hair? Are you having a bad hair day? And all sorts of questions. They used to walk around my classroom to see me because I look so different from them. And also the fact that I couldn't speak very good English, and for them it was shocking, like, wow, is there any other language than English? Like, they didn't know, so there was not so much diverse knowledge people had. Then when I started Queen Mary, and I was just like, yes, I feel like I'm at home again. Queen Mary, yeah, I really felt connected with the whole area. And soon after I graduated, I got a job in Citizens UK. I'm currently also doing a fellowship with London Civic Future, which I'm quite looking forward to start end of this month. So yeah, I'm very looking forward to hearing from more from our panelists and learn from them.
Thank you, Afsana. I think everyone's introduction leads very well onto my first question, and the first question of the evening, which is, how did you choose the path that you are currently in? And how did you choose? What made you choose this? I'm going to open the floor up, so feel free to jump in, whoever wants to take the first shot.
If I start off, I never intended to go into teaching and then ended up as a head teacher. That's really interesting. I mean, the one bit I was very confident with, I loved my subject, which was science. I graduated, my degree was in biochemistry and so on. And I knew I wanted to do something in science. But when I was quite young, I actually wanted to do medicine. And I was really motivated for medicine. But my parents, unfortunately, and it still happens, weren't happy with me going out of London I had a place at Birmingham actually to read medicine, but my grades were just one grade lower than what they required for London universities. And I was rejected from London, but was offered a place at Birmingham, and my parents said no. So really I started off at Queen Mary as a second choice. But wow, what sometimes one door closes, another one opens. And then I did my teacher's training. But the path was actually chosen by my love of my subject. So either I would have gone into medicine, or as I progressed through teaching with starting off as a science teacher. So I think that's where my passion has come from. It's actually the love of science from school that I had.
So shall I throw my story into the mix? So when I graduated, it was then the worst year of graduate unemployment. So I just applied for anything. I mean, like anything. And I could have just as easily ended up in marketing or publishing. And the first job I was offered was in HR. I didn't really know that much about it, if I'm perfectly honest. I just accepted it. And it was an education authority. So my career started off in education, and it's been in education ever since. And I have to say that I'm really glad that I liked it. It did resonate with me, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it ever since. I should say that it's quite funny. People think if you're in HR that you have planned every single phase of your career, and that when you've ended up in a role like mine, it's part of a grand plan. Absolutely not. Every job I've ended up in has been a complete accident. There is nothing I've ever done that has been planned for. It has just been a series of, oh, that was quite interesting. Oh, I'll do that. Or, oh, I don't have any experience in this area. I'll go and have a look for something and see if there is anything. And but there has never been a grand plan. So you can still end up having quite a reasonable career without actually having given that much thought to it.
Yeah,
I'm very, very, very proud to be at Queen Mary today, and delighted to be here. So thank you.
But the interesting thing is, you do come across, Sheila and Sarah and Afsana, people who actually say, by the time I'm 40, I'm going to be a head teacher. By the time I'm 50, I'm going to be like this. And it's really interesting. Like you, I never had a plan to be a head teacher. Things happen, circumstances, sometimes being in the right place at the right time opens up doors for you. So I think as long as you're flexible and you look for opportunities, and things will sometimes find you as well. So yeah, it's really interesting that you end up in a very different place to perhaps what you were planning.
Absolutely.
I think also to remember that plans, even the best laid plans, don't always work out. And I think when I was younger, I was obsessed with the plan and obsessed with meeting that plan at a certain stage in life. And if I hadn't, I'd failed. And that is not necessarily the case at all. I wouldn't change anything, including some of the failures and some of the losses along the way, because otherwise you wouldn't end up where you are. And you learn, and I learned so much from some of the losses. So I had stood for election before and I lost, and that was devastating. But I think it has made me a much better MP and representative for Luton North in the way that I have learned from that. But I think how I got involved, it's funny. So I was the first one in my household to go to university. I remember this conversation with my mum as if it was yesterday. She was so upset when I said I wanted to do international relations instead of law. She was like, what are you doing? Like, you're the first one to go to university and you're going to throw it away on politics. She probably had a bit of a point to begin with. But I said, no, this is really what I want to do. And like Sheila and Bushra said, you might not set out to do what it is that you end up doing, but make sure that you love doing what you do, because you're a long time doing it. And I knew I didn't want to do law. I knew that. And I put my foot down and I said, no, I really want to do this. And at the time I wanted to work in kind of international politics, but my failure in languages meant that I had to concentrate much more domestically. But it is exactly where I wanted to be. It's exactly what drives me every single day. And I love it. And I am grateful. And I am, fired up every day, even when I'm tired. And that is a real privilege to be able to say that about the job that you do and the work with the people that you work with. And that's where I'd say, but I would say as well that if you do have a plan and it doesn't work out, and if you are one of those people that go, I want to do this, this and this at some stage, fine, go with it. But if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. You would have learned all the things that you need to carry you on in the future from that plan, whether it works or not.
Definitely. Afsana, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I think like I feel like growing up, I don't know whether it's there's a systematic order. It kind of like falls on us. I don't know whether it's culture or global that says like get GCSE, get A levels, get your degree, get married, get a job, then get married, brought up your family. And I remember like having a conversation with one of my cousins who did not follow any of this. It didn't work for her like that. She got married very early age, yet she finished her degree after married. She did her PGC after her son got his PhD. So she didn't give up on her dreams. She still became a teacher, which she always wanted to become. And she was telling me that, I don't know who created that system or that order. You don't have to follow that order. And I remember like, I'm definitely blessed in that sense that, I grew, my family does not have that sort of expectation from me. Like you have to go with that order. You have to get married at a certain age or have to get that sort of job. But we're living in a community, and I do hear people, what they think that does affect our mental health. Like there is an expectation. Oh, you got a job, you should get married now. And I remember in 2018, I was talking to some relatives and saying that I want to go to pilgrimage, which is Hajj, and the relative was saying, don't think about it now. Get married and go with your husband. Now, just like you can actually worship God without your husband. And there is, and at that moment, I remember like challenging the person. And after that, we never had this sort of conversation. And I think the person is very aware of, like, I am not one of this person who'd actually follow one of those unnecessary order that people created. And as Sarah said, like, yeah, it's good to have plan, but if it doesn't work, And or if you can do something earlier than they probably expected, why not? Why should you have to wait for that? So I think it worked for me. Soon after my graduation, I had some of the great work experience with Citizens UK. I got this job, and I felt that what I really wanted, which is work in justice system. I had a job in civil service, and then I thought community is something I'm passionate about, and especially working with Tower Hamlets, as I said, I feel very connected with the community. So it worked for me, and I'm here, and I'm now expanding my opportunities to see how can I grow within this area. So I'm loving it.
That is really good to hear. I'm curious. So, what do you think are your guys' biggest motivations on your career path to get where you are, and also the biggest challenges? Because you talked about like, you know, the expectations of others or the plans, but through your journey, what has been the biggest, motivations and challenges, or they might go together?
I mean, if I started off with one of my motivators is this thing about role modeling for other people. I think, you know, Sarah said about being the first in your family to go to university. I was also very similar. And I knew that if I was successful at university, it was actually going to make it a lot easier for my younger siblings, for example, and my cousins and so on. When I became a head teacher in, you know, and that was going back in 1993, you know, it said I was one of the first Muslim female head teachers in the country. Now that's, you know, a great honor, you know, a great privilege, but it does put a responsibility on your shoulders as well, that you can't do it just as well as a white person or, you know, another person. Because you're the first to do something, you've actually got to, if you fall, you bring actually, and it's an extra responsibility you carry, you feel you've got to do it that much more. You've got to do it better and so on. So my motivator is really trying to, whatever I've done is to open the doors for other people, so that once I've got through and I can show that people can do it, then there would be an opportunity for other people to go through that door as well. So I think, you know, becoming a Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Greater London, you know, I mean, I hadn't even heard of what a Deputy Lord Lieutenant is, let alone, you know, and, you know, but when I became a deputy, and I, you know, went into this room full of predominantly white males, you know, very high flyers in their different careers and so on, and there's me standing there in the middle of them, and you think, wow, I can learn a lot, but I can also share some of my experience for others to learn from me as well. So you're changing those stereotypes and those perceptions of Muslim women. So I think that's another motivator for me, that when I am in those positions and when I'm speaking or I'm interacting, some of the perhaps blockages that people have got about Muslim women hopefully can be broken down as well. So I think my motivator is changing the stereotypes of Muslim women.
Yeah.
I think that resonates with me very, very much. I mean, I grew up at a time when I was, I think, to start with, probably the only Indian child at school. And in my area, it was very, very rare to even see another Indian person. And you know, growing up, very much like as Fana was saying, you know, it's like you're a novelty, and people would say quite strange things to you at school. But putting that aside for now, so I think for me, it never occurred. It didn't occur to me that I couldn't be what I wanted to be, and so I sort of felt, well, I do need to I just need to carve my own path. I just need to be my own person, whatever that was. And I think what I said to myself was, be ambitious, reach for it. Don't believe that things are not things are unattainable, because you need to believe in yourself, and you need to prove things to yourself. I don't think I was trying to prove things to others, actually. I think I was more trying to prove things to myself. And through your own actions, you can demonstrate that anything is possible. And for me, that is so important. It's so vital to be able to start with yourself, and use yourself as your own moral compass for saying, this is what I stand for, this is what I believe in, this is what I want to do, this is how I'm going to do it, and just be your own person. And for me, those are a very deep-seated values that have, I think, been with me ever since I was a child. And I think that's really shaped my thinking and how I've approached life throughout.
Yeah, just wanted to probably add something here. I like growing up, last 10 years probably, when probably I started to really read news and update myself with what's happening around me. Always heard the stories of like women like me didn't get what they wanted, they didn't get a job. Even my own sister, she didn't get a job in finance sector because she wears hijab, and it explicitly actually said in the email that despite you meeting the criteria, some of our panelists believe that you won't be able to fit in the office environment because of your attire. And I remember me and one of my other sister was actually motivating my sister, saying like, you should actually challenge them because that is discrimination. And my third sister, she's very like, she likes that, she thinks everything can be given to her. She's just like, don't worry, it's fine. um and but we really wanted her to fight for that. and and 2 years ago, this is when I found my motivation. What I do is, when a woman, she wears niqab and in Tower Hamlets, and it's one of the diverse borough, and I think I've already said it 3 times, one of the school was not allowing her to get inside the school because she wears niqab, and she's been told it is because of security reason, while the mom was willing to show her face for identity purpose, but she still was not allowed to go in. She was given 2 options. One is remove your niqab, which is compromise with your faith, or leave the building, which means not you can't know what your children doing in school. She stood up there. She said, can I create another option, which is change? And she actually came out from the building for that moment. She went to organize herself with mosques and churches, with other parents in different schools. She done a lot of like research, finding out what other schools doing on that, what's their policy. She then went back to the school and said, this is discrimination. The school knew it, that they're doing discrimination, but nobody challenged that. A lot of parents, she found that they actually left the school. They said, oh, our children don't go to that school because they don't allow us to go. We can't go to parents' evening because they say, bring somebody else, send your husband, don't come because you wear niqab. 7 months she fought against that school. And while she was doing that, she built a relationship with one of the school governor. And as a result, her issue was on the agenda, and they dealt with it. And finally, she actually changed the school policy. And while in the process, she realized that the reason for this sort of discriminatory policy are taking place is because not enough women like herself around the decision-making process. Not enough people are challenging that. So she became a parent governor of the school. And then while she was actually in that process, she also found out that she, being as a niqabi woman around like 12 others white middle class privileged men, she can't actually change a lot of things. She went back to her parenting groups, and she started developing those women and saying, you guys don't just come to school for parents' evening and coffee morning. You need to be in decision-making process. So now 2 niqabi women are parents governor. And for me, that is the motivation I received like 2 years ago, that is pushing me to do what I'm doing today. And I always tell my sister, you should have challenged to that finance company who didn't give you a job, thinking just because you wear hijab that undermined, or that kind of like made them to see that's a certificate that she won't fit in. But look at this woman, she challenged and she changed now. So this is just one of the few examples that actually, for me, I always tell myself, if they can change it, I can also change some perception as well about how people see me.
That was massively inspiring, Afsana. I'm so glad you shared that. And it's not just change, I think, for representation and for underrepresented groups, but it would have made that school a better place as well.
Mm-hmm.
They gain from that. They gain from that diversity as much as we gain representation. I think for me, it's always been, my biggest motivator has always been a sense of kind of fairness and justice and challenging that inequality. And I didn't think I'd ever end up here. It is hard to be the first. Like, to convince my mum that I could get a career in politics, let alone being MP, she was like, she just thought I was on a different planet, because I couldn't point to anybody that sounded like me, looked like me, had come from my background. And she just thought it was completely pie in the sky. I might as well have said to her, I want to be a Premiership footballer. I do not have skills in that sector. But she was, and so I think role model is really, really important, and not being the only one. I don't want to be the only one. I want more, because otherwise, like I said, like Asana said, we are robbed of that representation. It's hard to make change. And Bushra's right. You end up with that burden of responsibility, and it shouldn't just be on one person's shoulders. And it's important as well, I think, to look for allies. Allies in this. They don't necessarily have to share the same background, but they have to share the same aim as you. And there are people that are willing to do that, and identifying them and amplifying their voice, their fight, as much as you amplify your own, is hugely important. So I didn't think I'd ever end up being this, but every step of the way I just thought, well, where can I make bigger change? Where do I make bigger change? Okay, so I become a Labour Party member, I start knocking on doors, I volunteer, I stuff leaflets. Where can I make more change? Okay, so I join a general committee, which is possibly, at that stage, it was one of the worst Thursday nights of your life, really. You had to like put your hand up. It was very alien to me. You put your hand up, and I just thought, this isn't campaigning. I'm not changing the world. Let's get back out on the doorstep. And it's where you could make most change. And then that happened when I went into the workplace. I was like, right, well, I'll join a trade union. More change, please. What's next? And that has continued, and that's been the biggest motivator. And it's still frustrating now. Being an MP, I still can't change the things I want to change because we're in opposition. And so I'm like, well, we'll fight now for a government so that we actually have power to change the things that we want to. I can still change some things, but not to the scale that needs to be changed, or the scale that I want to change. So my biggest motivator is change.
I think that is.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
I mean, the interesting story of Sana, I just wanted to link in with a personal story of mine, that I went for a job when I was just starting actually Queen Mary as a student. I went for a summer job in Midland Bank. This is going back right back in the early 1970s for a summer job. I was interviewed, I'd gone with a trouser suit, and the woman who interviewed me said, fine, we'll give you the job, but we have to say one thing, that when you come in for the job, this is only a 6-week summer job I was going to do. They said, we have a dress code, which is that women don't wear trousers. You would have to wear, and they didn't have a uniform. It just, they said anything that is, smart, skirt, dress, whatever, but not trousers. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't, for religious reasons, I cover my legs, so I would wear trousers and so on. Would that not be allowed for religious grounds? They said, no, no, no. And a very interesting conversation happened with her. I said, I'm going to be working in the back office filing, for 6 weeks. What impact will me wearing trousers have? No, we can't manage that. No way. And I got 17. I don't know how I got the courage. I said, could I speak to the person, in charge? This man came in. I explained my reasons to him. I said, look, I really want this job, but really your dress code is stopping me from getting it, and so on. And, I'd like to put a complaint into you for that, and so on. And he said, oh, well, let us think about it. And 2 weeks later, I actually got offer of the job. And when I went into Midland Bank, it was in Threadneedle Street, and it's still there. I actually got a round of applause from women, because I was the first woman in Midland Bank to be allowed to wear trousers. And they had been fighting, you know, for trousers. These are white women who are working there, but they'd been prevented. But because I'd sort of levered it on religious grounds, they'd allowed me, so it opened the way for them. So that was really interesting at the age of 17. You know, but it takes somebody, you know, you talk about allies or something clicking, like those governors, it's clicking that, you know, this is discriminatory. It's not going to impact on the job. And now, you know, thing of dress code, and if you look on equality issues, nobody can be denied a job. You know, if it does not interfere on health and safety and so on, then you should be as flexible as you can be to include people rather than exclude them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that, you know, like when we bring ourselves fully, this is when we provide, like, give the best. And I remember doing like parliamentary intern while I was in my 3rd year. And I remember the day before Wednesday, I used to do that. And the day before, I used to spend hours and hours thinking about what am I going to wear? Would that be acceptable in the environment I'm going to tomorrow? I used to think about my best clothing that I have in my cupboard. I used to think about like which color hijab I'm going to wear. I had to make sure that I don't look too Muslim or like too alienated, and you know, like all of this thing. And whenever I think about this sort of thing to myself, I say I burn so much of my energy just thinking about how to fit in. But as a result, I never felt ownership. I never want to fit in an environment. I want to take the ownership. I want to be part of it. And I feel like there is a whole burden, you know, that there's certain thing, it's designed certain way. Smart is defined in a certain way, and that automatically that definition does not allow somebody else coming with their cultural identity. You know, my dress code won't affect the what I would be able to offer, you know, with my MP or whatever work I'm doing. In fact, it will make me more comfortable. As a result, I probably will be able to offer better. So how do we also tackle that sort of, these are some of the challenges. How do we tackle that sort of definition? How do we define what does smart looks like? How do we define what is good?
I think one thing you've all alluded to is change and changing the system. And another thing that all of you have mentioned is representation, how most of you are the first to do things and have sort of paved the way. In terms of representation, how important do you think it is? Clearly it's very important. For me, I know for a fact, growing up not having seen that many Muslim female leaders in any sector, that it's quite detrimental for me to think I don't know if I can ever be at a certain stage. I just wanted to get your thoughts in terms of representation and the importance of it.
Yeah, I mean, when I started at Queen Mary as a council member, I remember this was 7.5 years ago, it was virtually all male, no ethnic minority on the panel, and yet you looked at the student population, which is very diverse. 7 years ago, it was very diverse and so on. So there was no reflection. And I'm not saying you've got to have, yes, you would aim to have more representation, but it was totally out of sync with it initially. And it's not just, you know, me, I represent the students, but I represent some of the students. So if the board or the governing body is a better reflection, then some of those issues that those communities and those students are facing are more likely to be discussed rather than from a very Eurocentric point of view. Similarly, you know, when, you know, you see a head teacher of a school, and I remember this man saying, just going past your school and seeing Bushra Nasir on your board in Newham, you know, we had 15 secondary schools that hadn't seen a Muslim head teacher, and yet over 50% of the students in Newham were Muslim. So they felt, the parents and the community felt that this was, you know, it was a school possibly, you know, would understand some of their issues a bit better because, you know, I represented part of that community and so on. So I think it's very, very important. But I think in terms of representation at board level, because decisions of organisations actually are made at board level. And the representation at board level of women on boards is not high. You know, we now got the big FTSE companies trying to get 30% of the women on boards, you know, as female. I mean, forget about, you know, the ethnicity, even gender is a big issue. But it is something we've got to, because then the companies or the boards then to represent the companies or the charities and so on can better serve the communities for which they're actually set up. So I'm very, very passionate, but you've got to have mentors, you've got to have allies, you've got to have management courses that people feel confident. It's no use putting a parent governor in a situation where they've never been to a meeting, they don't know how to be able to pull the levers of support. So I think training is very, very important for that, and getting the networks of support in order for people to be able to do that. I remember doing a course, Women into Management. It's one of the best courses I did. It gave me that confidence. So that was a young teacher, I never thought about management, but that Women in Management really nurtured. I'm now part of a program where we're training up CEOs from BAME communities. The representation of head teachers and CEOs of BAME background is less than 1%. And the only way to do it is through training. So we've actually put together a program of BAME CEO programs where we're going to do internships, we're going to do coaching, we're going to do skills training for people to be able to, and then to have that backup and support. So when they go into that role, there are people also to guide them as well. So there's, if you want to improve representation, you've got to improve the structures of support that are needed as well.
And I think,
oh, sorry,
I was just going to add, I think higher education plays a massive, massive part in creating those structures and creating those pipelines to enable especially young Muslim girls or young Asian girls to go into leadership roles and to nurture them from that age. If I, for example, if I wasn't in the students' union, I don't think I would have ever thought I'd have anything to do with a leadership role. And that's only because of the environment I was in higher education. And I think, Bushra, I've not met anyone until I met you. I haven't met anyone in higher education from my background. So it was really nice to be able to see you on the governor board. So yeah, thank you for your service. I did want to, Sarah, sorry, I kind of interrupted you.
That's okay, not at all. I think Bushra's right about how we have and developed those leadership roles, but there is also something about changing the culture within it, because although we have like very good diversity within the new intake for Parliament, for example, it hasn't changed the culture of politics. It's still very male dominated, it's still very white dominated, and it's still very much kind of middle to upper class as well dominated. It hasn't changed the culture, and it's the culture that we need to change. Representation really helps that. Like, it's only been this month that a cabinet minister is now going to get paid maternity leave and won't lose her job and her place around that decision-making table, because we've just rushed through some legislation because there happened to be a pregnant woman there. They suddenly went, oh no, there is a problem. So representation does solve it. But what I don't want to see is more good women going into structures that are just not fit for purpose. So that when we have that representation, when we have that leadership, when we get a core group of people in there, that they really affect change, so that it is easier to bring the next generation into it, that it's not that they have to overcome another barrier, that organisation or that industry or that institution has actually changed enough that it can do it organically as well.
I mean, I think that's completely right. And it's interesting, I mean, just thinking about higher education itself, about 5 years ago, I went and did a presentation at an EU conference. I won't be invited back, obviously, and it was really talking about advancing gender equality. But what I'm going to say will relate to diversity and ethnicity as well, which is in higher education and in research traditionally, funding bodies, so the decision-making bodies that give out the monies, were all run by men, and they only looked at things, they only looked at research funding through a male lens. So research is informed by looking at things. For example, with medicine, they only use male mice to model medical solutions and health solutions. If you take AI, in fact, I mean, Shamima will probably be able to talk about this far more than me, but there isn't a gender, that it's very difficult to get a perspective of how gender issues are really relevant in finding solutions. And so we need to make sure that the funding bodies, the culture in funding bodies change, the criteria for allocating funding changes, that we encourage people who are defining research and defining education programs, bring in those diverse perspectives. I mean, I read about a wonderful example the other day, which is that because of bringing in Asian women into AI, they had designed an app for women in Bangladesh, because they experience so much sexual harassment traveling from A to B. Using this app, they could identify safe routes and also have a safe space to interact with each other, so that actually traveling from A to B was no longer the challenge that it was previously. Now, there's no white man in London who's going to think about that environment and what people in that environment are experiencing, what women in that environment are experiencing. And for me, it's stories like that that are so inspiring, which is why we've got to change the culture. And I absolutely agree, Shamima, you know, universities have a fantastic role to play in this. And I think we should just seize those opportunities. And wherever any of us have got decision-making opportunities to inform and influence and change, we should just seize them, definitely.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. There's an American actor. He was kind of like defining the definition on differences between diversity and representation. Often we get mixed up with them. And he was saying like how a lot of companies, they say, oh, we care about diversity, and they just create like a generic quota system. We need to have, you know, one Black woman, one Asian woman, and one Chinese man, just to tick the boxes, and then not really looking at what is the community look like. Yes. That is when representation comes, the reflection of the community. And if you look at like Tower Hamlets, Queen Mary University is one of the most diverse university anybody can study in. When we look at our academics, that does not show where is the representation within academics. Yes, students are there. Also, certain subject, when we look at like there are certain subjects, there's certain you know, Asian or BAME students are lower in certain of them than others. And that sometimes we think like some of the organization, they just like to do probably like an easy process, creating the quota system. We're going to bring new people with an old menu. So yeah, we've got a few new people here, but we're still working on the old menu, and that menu probably doesn't have any halal food. You know, it doesn't have any vegan. So how do people like me feel welcome, and how do you create a space for me to grow and develop and to bring myself? And as Sarah said earlier, that school has become stronger by having people like these two leaders who wear niqab, and they would understand the community and the challenge, because they have stronger relationship with the parents rather than probably the head teacher, who probably comes from a different area. You know, and I have heard of many parents saying that, oh, I'm a parent governor because the head teacher just wanted, you know, me to be there, but there is not enough support is providing for them. And this is what Bushra was talking about. How do we create that platform, that space for people like me to grow, not just bring me around the table, but welcome me, give me the space to grow.
Yeah, I think you've outlined a really clear distinction between actual representation and then tokenism, just having someone from a different background for the sake of it, just pat yourself on the back. But it's actually important to have that support available and to actually engage meaningfully. Also, Afsana, I'm aware you have to leave us, so I just want to say thank you so much for being here this evening. I know you've got another meeting to get to. But yeah, before we continue, just wanted to say thank you so much. And I don't know if you have any last words or anything like that.
Thank you for having me, inviting me here. I learned so much from the panelists. Always feel great seeing Bushra. I always get a lot of inspiration for her, lots of energy from her. And it was so good meeting Sheila. So proud to be in an university where you are women like probably look like me, holding one of the highest position. And that is definitely contributes to my motivation and my dream to dream big. And Sarah, thank you so much for your contribution, and thoroughly enjoyed being here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Amazing. So I've got another question for you all to consider, and that's just wondering, how has your identity as an Asian woman affected your journey, whether that's like through your career to becoming these different leaders that you are? How has that been affected by your identity?
I think for me, the sort of schools initially where I became a head teacher, when I thought about being a head teacher, I thought this was a sort of school that my identity and my background actually would be a great advantage, because obviously it was very representative of the students and the community that I would be serving. But interestingly enough, that served me well, and I think hopefully I had an impact on that community. But then when I was a head teacher, we were given this role of what's called a school improvement partner, which is, these are for experienced head teachers who want to work with other schools. And I decided not to take the easy route to work in school in Tower Hamlets or in Waltham Forest. I actually chose to work in Essex. So go into a totally white area, so that, when I walked in order to be that mentor, that coach, that support to a white head teacher, it was a white school. Because I felt the challenges of improving education are exactly the same, whether it's for BAME children or white children. Underachievement is underachievement wherever it goes. But I also wanted to influence a different area and so on. So that's when I, work there. And obviously, that thing of being the only white person, the only, Asian person at a head teacher level was a very interesting one. And when I became a CEO, and this is in charge of 4 schools, 4 white head teachers, one of the head teachers said to me, my secretary said to me, who's that Indian lady who waltzes in and out of this school wearing a sari? That was wording that this person had used. Who's this lady who comes in and out of our school, walks in and out of our school wearing a sari? I said, well, can you just tell her that, one, she's Pakistani, she's not Indian, and that's called a shalwar kameez and not a sari, and she's my boss. And she did. I mean, she actually said it to her and so on. So I think there are great advantages of being, representative of the community and serving that community. But you've also got to take that bigger leap and going in an area when, you are different from that. But because of your experience, because of your expertise, you're there. I was that mentor to that white head teacher. It was my skills as a professional that were needed. Then I think you're having quite a lot of influence on that white community as well. So I would say to you, don't just stay in your comfort zone. Venture out of your comfort zone and put yourself, and it's sometimes, coming out of your comfort zone is not easy, but try to do that sometimes, because actually you can get quite a lot of impact there as well.
Sheila, did you want to go, or should I?
You go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I'm so polite.
I was just thinking, does it really shape me, my identity? No, because I think I'm used to what I look like. I'm used to who I am. It probably shapes other people's reaction to who I am and to what I look like. And sometimes that can be good, and sometimes it can have really negative, really hard impacts, particularly in kind of public facing roles. The world of social media is not a kind place. And particularly for a mixed race person, mixed heritage, you can be too much of something, not enough of another thing. And I don't think we talk about the challenges that mixed heritage people face enough in the conversation around racism, because it kind of works both ways. But for me, I had to get comfortable, as Bushra said, not being in my own comfort zone. So like working in the fire brigade surrounded by white men, or going into the trade union movement and sitting there with a group of shipbuilders to go to a minister who just sat there, and the two trade union officers were women, myself, another woman called Rasheen from Unite, and I was from GMB. And we had our two delegations of shipbuilding men to bring to this minister. And he sat at the other end of the table going, lads, 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 lads. And I was like, Rasheen, are we invisible? Have I suddenly become a lad or something? And so I just sat there with my hand up. And I'm aware that looks strange. And I'm aware it took I had to take back that space and take back that ownership so that it was something I was comfortable with. But it was uncomfortable for them. It was uncomfortable for that man that wanted to take away the ownership, not just from me as a woman, but from working men as well. And so when he finally, and because he sat opposite me, he couldn't ignore me forever with my hand up. He came to me and he said, yes, what's your question? I said, well, before we come to my question, I think the members here and the workers that you're about to put out of a job have got some things to say. And it's about going into a place that isn't necessarily, I think, your normal environment. You wouldn't necessarily say you've got other people that look like you, but you can still make that space yours. And sometimes that isn't always the easiest thing to do, but sometimes it's necessary. And I think you'll be surprised at how successful you are then at really making change happen. Because they're not used to dealing with it. And it's an element of surprise, and it's wonderful when it comes off.
I think that part about change is really interesting, because I think, especially with the kind of discomfort, especially for allies, for change to happen, it's going to be uncomfortable. If it's not uncomfortable, then nothing's happening. You're just staying where you are. So I think that's a really well thought out thing.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think, again, for me, I think because of a lot of the time that I grew up, I was in predominantly sort of white environments. And so a lot of my interactions with people were conducted in a very different way. But one of the things that was really important was when I got married, which was a long time ago, I deliberately chose to keep my own name, because if I'd taken my husband's name, I would have sounded completely English. And so throughout my early life, I would walk into places as Sheila Gupta, and for me, wearing my Indian identity was so important. It was my pride, and it defined everything about me. And people were really, really surprised about that, because again, people make cultural assumptions. Oh, doesn't your husband expect you to take his name? No, it's what I want. It's who I am. I actually do make decisions for myself, you know. It's quite extraordinary, and again, I've chosen for whatever reasons, I've chosen not to have children, and it's kind of, what does your husband think? It's my body. It's actually up to me. I mean, it was actually, neither of us wanted children, but that's by the by. It's completely irrelevant. It isn't about what does he want for my body. No. And the assumptions that people make in so many conversations that I had throughout those early years of my working life and my career, and I just thought it was really quite telling. But for me, the important thing was to challenge it, continually challenge it, and say, but why would you think that? Sorry, I don't understand. Can you tell me what's your thinking behind that? Because again, I think, as you're saying, Sarah, turn the conversation around to be the other person's issue, to be the other person's problem, not your own. I'm very pleased and comfortable in who I am. I don't need to explain myself. You know, you can take me, I'm Sheila Gupta, this is who I am. Take me or leave me, but don't try and tell me what you think I should be. And that just has defined so much of my life.
I think that ownership is very, very powerful in terms of giving you direction, giving you motivation as well. I know we don't have that much time left, but there are some things. One thing I wanted to ask is, for example, the likes of me, I've had a taste of leadership for 2 years and I've absolutely loved it. For what advice would you give for people like me who wants to carry on becoming leaders, who wants to go on that journey of becoming leaders? What advice would you give to those Asian girls who are starting to think about where to go, how to do it, trying to build up the courage of trying to get their families on side, and all of those expectations that they have for themselves, the societal expectations? What advice would you give? It's a hard question.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the advice is your journey, probably Shamima, was very different from my journey when I was at school. You've probably come across a lot more people who have made it into different areas that perhaps I didn't have the experience of. So you've got a greater strength than I had got on what you've been seeing and so on. One is, and it's something that is very, very important, is that self-belief in yourself, that I can do this. I've got, this, sometimes women particularly have this imposter syndrome. Can I do it? Am I good enough? When, I know I've been on head teacher training programs, okay, when people are applying for headships. Now, this is at the end of their career. A lot of men will apply for jobs when they are sort of 50% ready for it. And the women will apply when they're about 80% ready for it. So, it is really being thinking of, have I got this imposter syndrome? Why aren't I as good as any other person? Don't carry that extra burden on yourself. And the other thing really I want to say for women is, if you want to balance, a career with a family, I think there are opportunities, now better. I mean, even Sarah, like you're saying, within Parliament, compared to where it was, to where it is now, it is better. You've got maternity leave, for example. You have got some sort of flexibility when before that wasn't there. And also, try to look at, we've said it before about networking with others. Try to build your own sort of support around you, so you motivate each other and guide and support each other. Try to pick up some, groups of people who are allies to you to be able to do that. The greatest people I had actually, in my career who guided me have been men, they've been women, they've been white, they've been all sorts of background. Just utilize anybody who helps you, to be able to do that. But also be centered on yourself. What is it that you stand for? What is it that you want? And then use other people to be able to help you. And that's not to say, you're using other people. You also give your time. Very simple example, if opportunities come up to be a governor in a school, to be involved in the PTA, to be part of Neighbourhood Watch, anything that takes you out there, volunteer for people. There's so many people now who've been furloughed, honestly, and you've got hundreds and thousands of opportunities for volunteering to extend your skills. So just maximize the opportunities that are available to you and build up your network of support. That's what I would say to anybody, because that certainly is what's helped me.
I mean, I absolutely concur, and I was going to say all of those things, so I won't repeat it, but absolutely, Bushra. I think a couple of things that I would say, Shamima, is I never sort of thought that I could do things that were kind of quite bold and out there. But that thing about believing yourself is so important. And that point about believe in the unattainable, because when you achieve the unattainable, you can put them on your CV and you can really impress. So just a couple of things that I can't believe I did it, actually, but some years ago, an advert appeared in the paper to apply for being on the Education Honours Committee. Now, never in a million years did I ever think someone with my background, my education, would ever get an interview, would even get an interview to be on the Education Honours Committee. So I applied, went through the whole process. I ended up serving on it for 2 whole terms. I still pinch myself today. I can't believe how I ended up there. You know, when you say to yourself, it must be an accident, they probably didn't really mean to offer it to me. But it's a wonderful thing to put on your CV, to have had those opportunities. And then another thing, which is just, it's much more to do with work. But some years ago, before I was working in a Russell Group university, I decided that I'd write to Ivy League universities to find out how you can embed diversity and inclusion into leadership development programs. So I wrote to Harvard and Cornell and NYU, thinking that I would just have the door shut in my face and I'd never hear back again. Not only did they invite, and I went with a couple of colleagues, not only did they invite us, but they had put so much work into those research visits. It was phenomenal, and it was really informative. So we learned a lot in terms of good practice. It was wonderful building those networks and those connections, and it was a fabulous experience. If you told me, I mean, I have no idea why I thought I could get away with it, but it's I think so long as you have a very clear rationale and if you know the answer to the question why and what benefit is this going to deliver, I think so long as you've got a very cogent, intelligent sort of narrative that you can offer, you believe in yourself, but you can do anything. You really can, and people will believe in you. So just go for it.
I think absolutely. In terms of getting your family on board, you have to trust yourself. You have to trust your gut, and you have to say to them, look, I love you. You love me. Trust me. Eventually, my mum agreed that politics was the right route. She does now, which is handy. But
I'm so glad to hear that.
But I did feel like I'm going out on a limb here. I'm telling my mum, who I love and I respect, I think you're wrong. I know myself. I know what I want to do. I know what drives me. And they instilled that in me. So trust me to do the right thing with those gifts that you've given me, was basically what I was asking her. It was probably a bit more argumentative, given I was like really teen and quite angsty and very angry. But that is the adult conversation that I think I had at that stage. I would say be choosy. Be choosy for yourself. Set the standards for what you want to do and what you're going to do high by all means, but also your standards high for who it is that you want to work with, who you want to be allies with, who you will surround yourself with when it comes to your leadership, your time, what you invest your time in. So Bushra is absolutely right. Women will only apply for jobs if they know that they've done it already, whereas men just go, I can do this. And this month, I advertised for a caseworker in my team, and I decided I wanted to do blind shortlisting. And out of all of the people that applied, I shortlisted 6. And of those 6, they were all women, and 3 were Black, Asian, minority, ethnic women. Completely blind, just going on the covering letter and the CV alone. And it broke my heart to see overqualified women, seriously overqualified, all the women that I had interviewed were doing jobs that they are so overqualified for. And that links into what I wanted to say about being choosy about where you work as well. Interviews are a two-way street. As much as you might want that job, if you get the feeling, or if you think, actually, this isn't, I'm not sure I'd want that person to be my boss. I'm not sure that they're worthy of my time and my skills. It's a two-way street. And I always go into an interview with that in mind. And I actually went into the interviews that I conducted with that in mind. It's a two-way process. And as I said, choose your allies, support them as much as they will support you in their battles, and choose your battles. I would always say it's really hard when you look at the world that we have today. There's so much that does need to change. But what is it that you really, really care about? What are the real issues for you that get you up in the morning? Because you could be drawn to loads of different things, and your energy can be taken in lots of different directions. But always, I'd say, choose your battles, and choose ones that you do also know that you can win. You can see a way through, because it is heartbreaking sometimes to continuously fight a battle that you know that you cannot win. So choose battles carefully, wisely, and focused is where I would go with that, because your time is precious.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for that advice. I feel very inspired.
I do too.
For the last part of this event, we're going to be opening up to a Q&A from the audience. So we've had a few questions in already, but if you have a question for any of our panelists or for all the panelists, then please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to submit your question. So the first question I'll ask from the attendees is from Calvin, and he asks, how can women who've made it through male spaces encourage other women and provide opportunities?
I think sponsorship is really important, because very often it isn't just about vacancies and jobs coming available. Very often it's actually, I think, working with colleagues and giving them the opportunity and access to things that they wouldn't otherwise get access to, whether it's taking them to governing body meetings, senior management meetings, other things where they have got an interest but they're not sure how to get in the room or sit at the table. So that sponsorship piece is really, it's really powerful. And not only that, it's, as the sponsor, you're actually sending a really powerful message to everybody else in the room as well. So I think that's quite a powerful way of doing it.
Does anyone else
Anything
want
else
to
to
come
add?
in on that one?
No, I'm sorry, I was looking at the questions on the Q&A as well. There was one from Trang, which kind of really stuck with me about, she's concerned about getting sponsorship. And I would say that obviously work with the university to find if there are any work placements, but also if she's having problems with visas, to really contact her MP. That is exactly what they're there for. And they should be able to help. Like, we have specialist lines that go straight to the Home Office around visa applications and visa options. So please, if you are coming up against a brick wall with that, please contact them. They're there to help you.
Thank you. There's another question as well, which is, if you could give white men one piece of advice to be better allies to Asian women, what would it be? One piece of advice, not a list.
Just one.
I mean, I have to say, respect is a very important thing, you know, whether it's Asian women or white women. I mean, just respect between men and women is I think, fundamental for any society to move forward. I think recently, with what's been going on and so on, and, you know, the third about women feeling very vulnerable on their own and the murder that's happened and so on, it's really a time for self-reflection at the moment. And, you know, the respecting women, teaching young men, you know, from you know, all backgrounds, the value in society of both men and women working together. What is it that makes women feel safe? What is it that makes women feel uncomfortable and so on? And treating women, you know, equally in lots of ways, but being sensitive to areas where there might be some vulnerability and so on. I mean, I remember at Queen Mary, actually, as a student, you know, we went away on some field work and so on, and there was one of our older students, and I remember very distinctly this man who, you know, I was going to have to walk to, you know, our sleeping quarters, and he saw me at the door looking a bit hesitant because it was some distance, it was dark, and he goes, "Bushra, would you like me to walk you, you know, to your sleeping quarters?" I said, "Fine." It just made such a difference, you know, to me, that somebody was that concerned, that, you know, somebody who was young, perhaps feeling first time they were away from home on a field trip and so on, they took that, you know, let's be sensitive to people and treat them with the respect that you would do for your own sisters and your mothers, really, I think is a very good way of moving forward.
I would say, to add to that, because that is a fundamental, I think, for men in the workplace and in education and in society generally, I would also say that men should be prepared to challenge other men. don't leave it all to us, because it's tiring. It is tiring. Some of my strongest allies have been cisgendered white men, and they have asked usually what would be helpful. They've just asked, what would you like? And I remember being in this meeting once, and I had been brought in to talk. It was in my previous role in the trade union, and I was being brought in to talk about the political strategy for a campaign. And I opened my mouth and I got jumped in on. And I just thought, no, you've asked for my advice. If you want to talk over me, you're not getting it. And I just kind of checked out. I just said that's, you know, if you don't want my advice, that's absolutely fine. I won't waste my time. And so when we left, my friend said to me, he said, I was deeply uncomfortable with the way that meeting took place. There were 2 women in it, 6 men, and the 2 women were talked over. And he said, like, you just stopped talking, and that's very unlike you. Normally you would challenge. And I just said, because I just didn't have the energy that day. It wasn't worth the fight. Like, it would have been for his benefit to hear what I had to say. It's not my benefit. It was his. He wanted my advice. He didn't listen. So he went and he said, would you mind if I said that I did not think that meeting went well and why I didn't think it went well? And I said, yeah, of course, that would be great. That's up to you. And he did. And I think just asking what would be helpful, because on different occasions, it will be different things. But just opening their eyes to seeing it through a different viewpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely concur. I think the 2 words that came to mind were to be open-minded and empathetic. We can't expect people to understand everything from our perspective all the time, but it is to be open-minded. It is to understand something from the other perspective. So very much ask what you want, ask what an Asian woman wants, ask what her experience is, what would help her, and then model it. Because that can be so powerful, and then share that with your friends as well. Be the person that spreads the word. And I think it is about saying why it's important and why it makes a difference. And very often, I think it's that human element, that human level that is lost. You know, we're not all defined we're not all stereotypes. So please understand that underneath we're human beings. So that's what I would really kind of emphasize. That human side of it.
Yeah, I have a bit of a follow-up question. Have you faced resistance then when leading men? Obviously, Sarah, you gave that example in that meeting, but yeah, have you faced resistance when being a leader of men, and how have you dealt with that?
Yes, I would say I have on occasions, and for some men, you almost have to prove your worth. You have to be even better, even smarter, and they come on board. There are some people that will just get it straight away, and there are others that never ever get it. And it's not on me. That's not on me. That's on them. That's on the organisation that you work in, or the company that you work for, or the institution that we're in. And I think it is difficult sometimes, but it's about trust. It goes back to trusting yourself and knowing your own worth and your own value. And sometimes that's really hard to maintain, particularly in like difficult times like this, where we don't have the support networks we would do normally, or we have to operate in this sort of space, which is quite alien, and can be quite draining in certain circumstances. But it is those scenarios, but also knowing that there are always going to be people, men and women actually, that will not always be won over, but that is not on your shoulders, and it is not your fault. That is definitely their loss. But it's getting a core group of people, it's getting allies. It was the Barack Obama's administration where the women would repeat what the other woman had said in a team meeting, because what they were finding was that a woman would say an idea and then the man would come along and say exactly the same thing, and then they go, oh, that's a brilliant idea, Brian. And I've seen that so many times. I've seen it happen to myself. I was like, did I just mention that about half an hour ago? So even in a leadership role, you can't lead alone. You can't lead alone. And so identifying somebody else that's also going to be, and most of the decisions in meetings are already taken before the meeting. And I think it's about making sure that you're not going in blind to anything. And if you are leading a group of men, or you're leading a group of people that are not like you, it's understanding that you should have already organised that win before you step into that room. It's about organisation.
That is a really, really good
Yeah,
advice.
I mean, Sarah, I'd say it's organisation and preparing. I think, you know, in terms of thinking yourself through, you know, what you said at the beginning, pick your battles. There are some things actually what I would call a small battle. You want to win the war. So pick the ones that are really, really important, that you're not going to budge on at all. And others you can let go a little bit, you know, just try to maneuver things in meetings and so on, so things get moved forward. I mean, the bit that I found really difficult was when I was a young head of science, and we had a group of 15 men and there were 2 women. There's myself and another white woman. We were the first sort of heads of science at that stage, right, going back in the around 1990. Just couldn't get honestly, a word in. So when the annual elections came up, I said, look, one of us has got to put ourselves forward. Okay, we won't probably get the chair, but we might get the vice chair. So let's get in on that decision-making process. And we won't stand against each other either. So, you know, she put herself forward. I got actually a couple of men in the background to also support her. So it wasn't coming just, you know, from a female perspective. You know, and then we got her as a first vice chair. The following year, believe it or not, things, you know, changed quite quickly. And at one stage, with majority men, we had a head of science who was a woman, and the chair was a woman as well. You know, so both of us, chair and vice chair, but it came with planning and preparation and so on. And the whole ethos changed of those meetings. We weren't there to go in unprepared. We weren't prepared just to make off-the-cuff remarks. We had structured minuted meetings. Actually, they were much more efficient than, you know, what they were in the past and so on. So I say pick your battles, the big ones, let other things go, bring your allies together and plan strategically, and you will be successful.
Yeah. And I suppose just a couple of things I'd add, which are tactics I've used during my career. So I spent an awful lot of my time, which won't surprise you, in male management teams, where I've very often just been the only woman, and sometimes there's been one other woman, but it's been all the things that you've described, not getting the opportunity to speak and so on and so forth. So one of the things that I do is decide that, well, they may be playing their game by their rules. I'm going to play my game by my rules. They don't know my rules. So it's difficult for them to know where I'm coming from, what game I'm playing, and indeed whether or not I'm winning or not. And that's actually quite a good way of doing things, because it leaves them completely nonplussed. They have no blooming idea what you're up to. And it's a very good way of getting your way at the end of the meeting. So always invent your own rules for whatever meeting you're in and play by them. They won't have a blooming clue where you're taking things, and you will win. The other thing I'd say is I agree with everything about planning and so forth, very, very important. But the other thing that I've also found is very helpful is to, in those meetings where you know people are just so garrulous, you know, they will not shut up, they will just, and they're competing with each other. So sit back, let them talk each other to death. A lot of what they're saying is utterly pointless, has already been said, and is getting the meeting absolutely nowhere. When people are sick and tired of hearing all of this, come in with your incisive comment and the point that everyone's dying for somebody to make that no one has made. Make it towards the end of the meeting. That's what people remember. And when the decision making is kind of wound up at the end of that meeting, your point will be the one that is actually held up and recorded and will carry. So exploit the situation to what works for you and your own personal style, and you'll never have to raise your voice. It's wonderful.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Thank you all of you. I think I have looked at the time. We have literally come to the end of an event. But before I go to Tiana to close, I did want to quickly say some quick remarks before we end things. So I've been VP Welfare last year, and one of the reasons I ran was to be able to influence other female students and be able to raise awareness for domestic violence and forced marriages because of my own experiences. And I think I'm really, really glad to have been able to work with the Students' Union for the past 2 years on issues like this and being able to be a more representative voice within the Students' Union. And I'm really, really proud of the work Tiana's done this year and the work we've done for the past 2 years, even in the middle of COVID. So I just really wanted to highlight how proud I am to have been able to be in the same institution as Sheila, Bushra, be able to meet the likes of Sarah through events like this. And I'm very proud of the work we've all done and the women that I've become because of the inspiration that I have around me. So I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone, and also the student body if they are watching, for allowing me to be their president. I don't think I'll get much of a public chance to say that before I leave in the next couple of months. So I thought I'll take the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And the feeling's mutual. It's been an absolute pleasure working with all of you. It's been absolutely great. And so much has changed, even in the brief time. You know, it's been really impressive. And well done to you both.
Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, thanks to all of you for agreeing to come tonight. This was a really amazing discussion. It was great to get to know a bit more about you all as well and to hear some of your wisdom and your comments. So yes, thank you as well to everyone who's joined us this evening. As I said at the beginning, this is recorded, so if you want to watch it again, you can do it. It will be on our YouTube account. If you want to share it with someone, please do that. Just before we end, I just want to plug a couple of things that's happening. So obviously I mentioned that this is Asian Heritage Month throughout March that we're doing at the Students' Union. So keep an eye out on our social media for other things coming up. We're going to be doing a video trying out different Asian snacks, but also discussing the importance of Asian Heritage Month and why we want to. I know, I'm so excited to try the difference.
Sarah, do you want to join us?
I did get invited for the snacks. What?
I can send you an invite. Yeah, I've ordered mine. I'm very excited because I've not tried a lot of them before. I know also BL next week is Merger Week, where they'll be looking at anti-racism, so keep an eye out for those topics as well. And one final thing to plug is the next Employable Me event, which is on female empowerment in the workplace, which I think is next Thursday. So if you're around, please come to that too. But thank you so much. And yes, have a wonderful weekend, have a wonderful evening. I've got another question from an attendee saying thank you. So yes, thank you very much. And I hope to see you soon and work with you again.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks ever so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you.